And it's amazing how the mind operates in as much as doing that. The way the mind operates, so it's a 5-step process, basically. It's been a while since I wrote about it. Let's see if I can remember. It starts with emotion, right? The emotion both triggers thoughts as well as attracts certain kinds of thoughts that are in harmony with the frequency of your emotion, right? And the context of the emotion. So the emotion begets the thoughts. Now, emotions are pretty much habitual, right? We feel certain emotions in certain situations because that's what we've gotten used to doing over the years. And so the thoughts that they trigger, tend to repeat, right? In the same pattern, right? This emotion leads to these thoughts. And as a result of that, those thoughts become habitual. And when those thoughts become habitual, they start programming beliefs. And when those beliefs become set in, right? When the subconscious mind accepts those thoughts because they're repeated so much and programs it as a belief, that belief now dictates your habitual actions, reactions, and behaviors. Right? So this is step 4 now. Those habitual actions, reactions, and behaviors are basically what determine the cause and effect of what happens around you to create the circumstances and experiences that you end up finding yourself in. And the circumstances and experiences that you end up finding yourself in always serve to confirm the original emotion, thought, and belief that went into their creation, right? Because the cycle must perpetuate itself. It has to. That's the whole point. It's a program. If it didn't perpetuate itself, it would be corrupted, right?
Yeah.
So, and corrupted data, right? Corrupted data can't perpetuate itself. So, the program is to perpetuate itself, and therefore, how then do you go about changing something in order to create better circumstances and experiences in your life, right? Well, you have to take a look at this sequence of 5 events and determine which one of these do I have control over. All right, so let's look at it from the front backwards. You don't have control over the circumstance or experience because that's happening right now. It's already happened. You can't do anything about that. So obviously you have no control over that. So forget about that. Just accept it, move on. What can you do? All right, so let's back up. Before that is the action, reaction, or behavior that created the circumstance, right? Well, you can try to change that behavior, but if you don't change the belief behind that behavior, it's going to be very difficult to change that behavior. AKA, you can't change a behavior without changing the belief, okay? Because all of your behaviors, well, 95% of your behaviors are dictated by your beliefs, right? They're just habits based on the subconscious programming in your mind. So, you can't really change your behaviors or your actions or your reactions because those are, for the most part, programmed, right? So what can you do? All right, you have to change the belief. Well, how do you change the belief? Right? Well, what is the belief made of? How is the belief programmed in the first place? It was programmed by thinking a certain thought repetitively over and over and over again for a long period of time. That's what programmed a belief. You can't just imagine a belief being deleted and reprogrammed instantly because it doesn't work that way. It actually takes time. It's a process in order to change a belief. And it involves the habitual repetition of thoughts, such as positive affirmations, right? Once you realize a certain belief that you have that's not serving you the way you want to be served in order to, create these circumstances and experiences you want to have, then you know that you need to change that belief, right? Now, the trick, of course, is first recognizing what that belief is. And in many times, it's very difficult to realize what that belief is, all right? Because the thoughts, though they may be repetitive, are also different, right? It could be a different imagination of a different time and place, but a same scenario, right? So it's tricky. We aren't always aware of how we're repeating these thoughts. So we can't really catch it there either. Where can we catch it? What are we typically the most aware of? Our emotions. The original cause behind this whole process, right? And this is the one thing we actually have control over. This is the one thing we have the most amount of awareness of. No one will ever tell you they don't know how they feel. Well, unless they're feeling so many different things that they don't know how they feel, but they're aware that they're feeling. Nobody can ever tell you that they're not aware of how they're feeling, right? That's the one thing we're always aware of. We're not always aware of what we're thinking. We're definitely not aware of what most of our beliefs are. We are hardly aware 95% of the time when we're taking actions and reactions and are behaving out in the world. And we are somewhat aware of our circumstances and experiences, but only in as much as how we know how they make us feel, right? So, the emotion is the key, right? That unlocks everything. It's what tells you what you're feeling as a result of this circumstance or experience. That feeling is basically the confirmation of a belief that you have. Now that you're aware of this feeling, and you have the context of the circumstance or experience, you can put two and two together and kind of figure out what the belief is concerning this, right? If this makes me feel like this, then I must believe that, right? So now you can triangulate in on what that belief is, start becoming more aware of that, right? And now you have to start by changing the emotion, right? Because the emotion is what attracts the thoughts, right? Like magnetism, right? The emotion magnetically puts out a certain frequency that magnetically attracts a certain frequency of thoughts, right? Because it's all electromagnetic. Everything is electromagnetic. So even the emotions we have and the thoughts that we have, that's all stuff happening in our electromagnetic field. It's all frequencies being put out to the universe from our electromagnetic field. So the emotion is what we have to focus on. When we can figure out what the emotion is that the circumstance makes us feel, and we can figure out what the belief is that we need to change, now all we need to do is change our emotion, right? Because if we keep feeling that emotion, you only have to feel that emotion in order to figure out what the belief is, right? And if you keep repeating that emotion, you're going to keep repeating those thoughts, which are going to keep repeating that belief, which are going to keep repeating the actions and the circumstance. So now that you understand, now you got to stop feeling that emotion despite the fact that you're currently in that circumstance or experience, right? You use that feeling, because you're aware of it, to remind you that you need to reprogram that belief. And so now you need to decide, what do you want to reprogram it into, right? So you figure that out, and then you figure out, well, how does that make me feel?
Brainwashing yourself.
Right, exactly. Now, how does that belief make me feel? So now you feel that emotion, so that you can attract those thoughts and start thinking those thoughts. Therefore, over time, you have to keep doing this intentionally, and over time, through repetition, you reprogram that belief. And then as a result of that, your actions, reactions, and behaviors automatically change as a result of that, because now you're reacting to a different belief. And so therefore your circumstances and experiences also change, because you've changed the chain reaction of cause and effect that goes into creating them. And I call that, so I have that's the one I call the law of attraction, right? Because what you're literally doing is using emotions to attract thought patterns to affect a change in your belief structure, to affect a change in your reality, right? So I call that the law of attraction, right? What people out there refer to as the law of attraction, that's what I call the law of attraction, is that 5-step process. However, I also have what I call the process of creation. And that's a 7-step process. And the process of creation and the law of attraction are actually infinitely interconnected, right? The 5 steps of the law of attraction exist in each of the 7 steps of the process of creation and vice versa, right? So the process of creation is basically the natural law of how consciousness creates reality, right? The law of attraction is the natural law of how we formulate our belief structures to dictate the type of experiences we have in our life and ultimately how we feel about our life, right? So that's basically all about self-control. The process of creation is about how we actually create a vision for the future, right? A goal, like a business or an invention or an artistic masterpiece or whatever the case may be, right? How we actually create something other than just like what we're experiencing. So the law of attraction is about what you end up experiencing, right? And the process of creation is about how you actually create, right? How consciousness creates, because everything is consciousness, right? And there's only one consciousness. We all share it, right? And we share it in a holographically organized way that allows us all to perceive as though we are each our own individual unit of consciousness within the vast sea of consciousness, so that we can actually relate to each other and interact with each other as others. But ultimately, we're all actually one self. And that one self is, you know, the one infinite creator, God, whatever you want to call it. And the process that this one infinite creator uses to create the universe that we live in, right, is the exact same process that we use to create our vision for the future, or our masterpiece of art, or our business, or our goals, or whatever the case may be. So that's a 7-step process. Let's see if I can remember all of these now. It's been a while since I wrote about it. So it's 7 steps in 3 phases. So phase 1 is conception, right? And it's just like, you know, the creation of life, right? So you have conception, gestation, and birth, right? And then from there you repeat that process over and over again, and that's growth. So the first phase is 3 steps, the first 3 steps, which are wow, come on. Fuck it, I'll just pull up my book and remind myself. There we are, right here. Okay. Yeah, that's the first one. Alright, so you have the conception phase is realization, reflection, and imagination. So realization is obvious. It's the realization of an idea, right? Something you'd like to create, right? And you either, you know, are enthralled by that idea, inspired by that idea, and therefore motivated to actually begin thinking about it more, or you're like, whatever, you know, and you just let it fall to the wayside. Well, if you're inspired by it, then you move on to step 2, which is reflection, right? Reflection means you're actually thinking about it over and over and over again, right? You're imagining different scenarios, different ways, you're visualizing different things, right? Different aspects, right? You go over and over and over until you get a full grasp on all the details, right? And imagination, right? So reflection, realization, reflection, and imagination, right? I call them 3 phases because each of the 3 phases are pretty much like separate steps, but they're simultaneously done, right? They're like a closed loop system, right? Realization leads to reflection, leads to imagination, right? So then you have the gestation phase, which is affirmation and reinforcement, which is really quite literally just the repetition of the conception phase over and over again, just like growth is the repetition of the entire process over and over again. Affirmation obviously is thinking certain thoughts or having the same imagination over and over and over again to continue to reaffirm it and program into your subconscious mind a belief that it is going to become a reality one day. You are going to do it, you are going to be able to, and therefore, further enabling you to actually see the opportunities as they become available and take the actions you need to take when you need to take them, when the opportunity comes. Reinforcement is kind of the opposite of affirmation, whereas doubts are going to come up, right? Weeds grow in a garden, right? So reinforcement is kind of the act of picking out these weeds, right? As they start to grow. So, people are going to argue against you. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to wonder if this is possible. Maybe it's too big of a dream. I don't know any people that can invest. I have crappy credit. I can't afford it,
No money.
But the reinforcement is the act of getting rid of all of those thoughts as they come, not allowing them to take a hold, so that your affirmations take a stronger hold, a dominant hold, because whatever dominates the mind is what you end up creating. So then you have the birth phase, which is consists of action and rest, which are pretty self-explanatory, right? You've repeated the conception and gestation phase so much that you become so aware that you can see the opportunities available and you're able to take action on them. And obviously rest is the most important part of this process, which is, don't overdo it, don't kill yourself, make sure you rest, because this process requires a lot of energy.
Yes, it does.
And you need to be in a healthy state of mind and a healthy state of body if you want to actually create it successfully. And for that, rest is a requirement. And so that's the process of creation, and the 5 steps is the law of attraction. And again, these two processes are infinitely interconnected.
I like the 5 steps more than the 12 steps.
Well, there's 12 steps total,
Yeah.
7 and 5, which is interesting because it's funny. Everything in nature, in natural light, it mimics music, right? 7 white keys per octave on a piano, 5 black keys per octave on a piano.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you could think of the law of attraction as the black keys, and you can think of the process of creation as the white keys. Right? And they all interconnect.
I like it. It's cool.
Glad you said that. I never actually thought of it that way before. It's very interesting. I never even actually noticed that before. But it's also in alignment with, there's 7 density layers per universe, or, per full unit of consciousness. AKA per organism. Universe and organism are the same thing. And I presume there's a 5 in there with the density layers as well, which are probably like transitionary periods of some sort, like perhaps like rest periods.
Yeah.
Between actual like self-aware consciousness and living and using energy, like actual like just rest periods. That's why the black keys on the piano are black. They represent darkness. Light keys represent light. Wakefulness versus rest. And then that's another thing though, density. Lots of people like to throw around, the dimensions of consciousness. Everyone keeps saying we're entering into 5D consciousness, and they mean 5-dimensional consciousness. And you're a little bit confused. There are dimensions of awareness, but there are not dimensions of consciousness, right? Consciousness is one thing, and it only contains 3 dimensions of space and 3 dimensions of time, or 6 dimensions total, right?
Oh, okay.
And those are the dimensions of awareness. So there's 6 dimensions of awareness, but there are no dimensions of consciousness. There are density layers, right? And they operate in, electromagnetic fields, right? Every electromagnetic field
Yes.
is a density layer of consciousness,
Oh,
basically.
okay, I gotcha.
So, you have the entire universe is, one gigantic electromagnetic field, right? Within that are galaxy clusters, which are electromagnetic fields within that. And within those electromagnetic fields are galaxies, which are electromagnetic fields. Within those are solar systems, more electromagnetic fields. Within those are planetary systems, more electromagnetic fields. Within those are ecosystems, more electromagnetic fields. Within those are organisms, more electromagnetic fields. That's one complete 7-density cycle, right? Then you have the organism, right? So one electromagnetic field for the whole body, right? And that's your first density layer. And then within that you have your organs and physiological systems. Each have their own electromagnetic field. Within those you have the cells, each with their own electromagnetic field. Within those you have the atoms, each with their own electromagnetic field. Within those you have the protons, each with their own electromagnetic field. Within those the quarks, their own electromagnetic field. Within those the superstrings, their own electromagnetic field. And that's the repetition of a universe within a universe, organism within an organism, over and over and over again. 7 density layers completes a whole, complete, total, self-aware consciousness. Self-aware unit of consciousness. So this universe has one self-aware identity. And the reality we experience is the dream of this universe. And we are all different characters. We are all this universe playing out different characters in this reality, right? And so to each other we are like separate identities, but to the universe we're all the same identity. And then the same process repeats within us, where all the superstrings within us are different versions of ourself within us, dreaming in the reality of the universe that's within us. Repeat ad infinitum. And thanks to quantum mechanics and unified field theory and things like that in modern science, we're starting to finally be able to understand and prove what, the ancient mystics have known forever. What the Hindu yogis today still know, what the Chinese medicine people still know today, Such things. Finally starting to realize that, spirituality is real. It's consciousness. Consciousness is everything. Everything is consciousness. Spirit is consciousness. Ether is consciousness. Electromagnetism is consciousness. We're starting to finally realize that. I mean, not everybody, because it's not popular yet, but a lot of people now do realize that, especially, quantum physicists. So eventually it'll be a known fact. The question is, will we go extinct first due to capitalism, or will we get our shit together?
Hopefully we get our shit together. I think we will. That's what it seems like. It seems like the system's kind of like falling apart as it is because of this whole virus.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually a lot of protests going on in America right now, and I'm like, wow!
They're trying to reopen.
Americans are protesting!
They're actually,
Holy shit!
They're trying to reopen now, actually. Even Trump wants to open up, like slowly.
I haven't seen an American I've never seen an American protest in my lifetime. I don't think they've existed since the 60s and 70s.
They're like in New York and stuff. No, they happen a lot, actually, but they're like small and shit.
Small worker union strikes and blah.
Yeah.
No, no. I mean a protest against your government, not your company. Yeah. Like, when's the last time Americans got together en masse and protested against their government?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Nobody likes what's going, especially down south. They're more aware about the government corruption than us. We're more entwined in it because of the fact that everything's so close together.
But unfortunately, protesting isn't going to be enough to solve a problem. These governments are long established in their ways. They're using methods that they've been using for 6,000 years. They do not want to change. Any change they do try to make, they basically just make it a language shift, but they don't actually change anything, right? The only way we're really going to solve anything is by, not protesting, right? All these people that are protesting, what we really need to do is actually just come together and form our own alternative society with our own government, our own banking system, and do things our way.
Our own cash, exactly.
And the only reason we'll need our own banking system is just because the rest of the world uses money and we have to do business with them. So we'll just make our banking system so that basically everybody just creates money on demand as needed, and that's how we pay for things. Because why the fuck not? And that way, at least for us, we'll be simulating what it's like to live without money while still being able to transact business with the rest of the world. And then eventually the rest of the world will catch on and be like, hey, why didn't we ever think of that?
Right. True that. Yeah, things are definitely changing though. People are waking up though, totally.
They are. A lot of people are waking up a lot faster now because of this whole thing.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the deep state really screwed themselves on this one. If their intention was to, lock us down into a totalitarian regime, they're failing big time. Because everything they're doing is just making people wake up a lot faster. And all that means, the faster people wake up, the more it's going to accelerate. And
we're getting all these people panicking, knowing that they're
pretty soon the majority will be against them.
Yeah, pretty much.
If they keep going down the road they're going, pretty soon the majority population of the entire fucking world will be against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's happening slowly.
I give it. Well, depending on how hard they try, I would give it anywhere from 1 year to 5 years before the whole world is against them. If they back the fuck off right now, right, they pull completely out of everything and just be like, all right, this is a failure. Let's just let everything go back to normal, to the way it was, and we'll try something else. If they do that right now, they might buy themselves another 10 years or however long until they implement their next thing. But the second they implement their next thing, they're fucked.
Yeah, definitely.
No matter what they do at this point, they're fucked. Too many people are awake at this point. Once you reach a certain threshold in the percentage of a population, an idea cannot help but to start exponentially growing. And, within 1 year of it reaching that threshold, the majority of the population will be in agreement.
Okay.
That's just the way evolution works. So what we need to get the majority of the population in agreement on is the fact that money does not need to exist and hierarchy does not need to exist. Hashtag humanism, hashtag alternative society, hashtag meritocracy.
Yeah, I think businesses are going to open again on May 1st, but I think there'll be a bunch of different weird rules and blah blah blah, but I think schools are probably going to be definitely going to be shut down for the rest of the year. I already know that, they haven't declared it, but I just know the school system's how it is, so I know they're going to have it off for the rest of the year, so.
It would be so glorious if they just kept schools closed forever. Our education systems today are... So I've been talking a lot lately about, money being a problem and hierarchy being a problem, and I've been touting those as the two primary problems, but in my book I actually talk about the 3 primary problems, right? And the third primary problem is our education systems. They steal our sovereignty by indoctrinating us into an authoritarian regime,
Yes.
right? They don't actually educate us. You know, they teach us the bare fucking minimum of what you need to know to work in, you know, your basic industrial setting for a low-paying job, and that's about it. And then there's college. College is even worse with the authoritarianism and their hierarchies. Oh God, especially the big universities. And you know, you can learn some good shit from universities, but you know, be prepared to also receive it in a very biased fashion based on the nation that you're based in. Unless you're going to like Maharishi University or something like that, which is you know, the Maharishi universities were set up by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, which is, you know, one of the founders of, you know, the unified science field. Or, you know, in his language, it's a Vedic science. So he's like the proponent of Vedic science.
Oh yeah, the Hindu.
Where the Hindu Vedas basically are a discourse on natural law, which is AKA physics.